Welcome to the Childcare Revolution Podcast, where we talk about all things childcare.
Hi, I'm Patricia.
Hi, I'm Tegan.
And I'm Stephanie.
We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and it's now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. And today's episode is about what it takes to become an ECE. So, one of the first things you need to know if you are not an educator is that you cannot call yourself that if you are not registered with the College of Early Childhood Educators of Ontario. We gained that right of becoming a regulated profession not that long ago, surprisingly. That was a way of professionalizing our profession. It sounds weird to say that, but before that, a lot of people still saw educators as glorified babysitters or nannies and what do they do all day? So we actually thought that our first episode that is a broader topic should be about what it takes to become who we are. The basic is you go to school for 2 years and you come out with a diploma in early childhood education. Those 2 years you have academic studies and you have your placement and you shadow other educators so that we can learn more about our profession. There are many layers to that. We'll get into that, but I think Stephanie and Tegan can talk a little bit more about what it's like doing those longer programs, those options of getting bachelor's degrees right off the bat, not just a college diploma.
Yeah, there are different pathways to become a registered early childhood educator in Ontario. I'm taking an honors bachelor's degree program in early childhood leadership. It takes 4 years and it's more focused on research and leadership. So instead of 4 childcare placements, you do 2 placements and then 1 internship. You also have something called lab days, which are like shorter placements and more focused on pedagogical documentation and curriculum planning. In the internship, you don't work with children, but in an environment that supports children. So think about a child development lab or a policy research institute or an advocacy organization. And then you complete a research project in year 4. And you can only get your REC certification at the end of the 4 years, which I think it's a huge difference from the diploma program.
There's also people that have the opportunity to do a bridging program as well, where they get their diploma first, they can register with the college, and then they can complete a degree program after 2 years of studying in a university or college, depending on setting up the program.
When we were talking before we started recording, Stephanie brought up this point that I never even realized, which is that the people that went to school with me, for example, I started ECE in 2015, and when our class started, there was a part of our class that was in a 4-year program. They were going to have bachelor's degrees at the end of 4 years. But in 2 years, I was done and I could register and work and get paid as a registered early childhood educator. For people that do a 4-year program, in 2 years, they're only halfway through. So even if they work part-time while going to school or working during the summer, you're still not allowed to get paid as an RECE. That had never clicked for me. I just assumed that you would be able to do that. But of course, because you haven't finished your program. But
I think it would make sense after like a 2-year period that you could go in and register, but it doesn't work that way.
Because here you need to accumulate enough practicum hours beside the amount of academic requirements.
In a 2-year period for your program, did you do 4 placements?
I have 4 placements, yeah.
In 2 years?
No, I have 4 placements in 4 years.
Okay.
So I have 8 semesters, and 4 of those semesters are placement semesters.
Oh, because your placements are probably longer than mine were. Like instead of just doing...
Say the term was from January to April, we have 2 days a week for all of those weeks.
For all of the... Oh, yeah, that's a long time. Okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I had just never thought of it. I think another thing that people who are not ECEs might not know is our employers are not allowed to pay us as early childhood educators. They would have to pay us as assistants until we have confirmation from the Ontario College of ECEs that we have been registered and that we are in good standing with our college.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that maybe we could talk a little bit more about what we study in school.
Hell of a lot. That's what we study. Yeah, so all of our programs, although they're different, they do have similarities in the content. We do a lot of developmental theory, pedagogy theory. I had this one amazing course, and it was about interpersonal communication. So being able to know how to make relationships with people and think about different types of leadership skills and things like that. So there's a lot of knowledge within our program.
We study a lot about brain development. I remember we had this course that we studied about even from pregnancy until the child is like 5, like all of the biological needs of the child. A lot of those biological needs have to do with relationships. They have to do with how we support babies and children as they're growing up. Because we're very different from animals, right? Like when you look at a baby elephant, for example. A baby elephant is in the womb for 20 months, and it comes out of the mama walking and not talking because elephants don't talk, but doing pretty much anything a grown-up elephant would do. Right? And when you look at a human baby depends on the grown-ups for growing and for surviving.
Their heads are the biggest part of their body, so they can't get up and walk like a baby elephant.
They can't do anything, and that's part of what we study is how our evolution as a species has led to care being such an important part of our lives, of society, of how our worlds are organized. And I don't think that people realize that we studied that so much. But I remember my first term in school, that was my favorite class because I loved biology and science in high school. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I didn't even realize I was going to study this. This is such a great added bonus. It was really, really fun.
Yeah, I remember studying a lot of brain development too. And not until I studied that, I realized that the early years are critical for human development. So much of learning happened during the early years.
And so much of that learning is through interaction and through relationships.
Exactly.
A lot of our classes, we watch videos of children, videos related to parenting and to care. One of the most fantastic classes I had was when we were discussing how different cultures raise their children in different ways. Mm-hmm. And that no one way is the best way because in all those cultures, those children are becoming adults. Mm-hmm. If we're talking from an evolutionary point of view, they're all succeeding, right? I think that that's so interesting, and that's one of the things that I love the most about what I do is the value of relationships and the value of interacting not just with the children, but with the children's world. When the children see us building a relationship with their parents, laughing with their parents, talking and sharing and inviting them into our rooms and exchanging books, talking about not just behavior or daily routines, but when we're talking about broader things, because you become, like, my program is a year long. So my preschoolers, they start with me in September and they finish in August when they're going to start school in JK. So along that whole year, I built a really strong relationship with those families, and the children can see it because now my old preschoolers are in JK, and when we're still in school, they would see me down the hallway and stop to chat and give me updates, and that's such a huge part of childcare and early learning. It's the understanding that those relationships, those interactions, they are vital for children's development.
Yeah, they definitely count a lot. They mean so much more, and that's what a big chunk of what we learned. I honestly going to say that I took for granted a lot of the courses that I was being taught because sometimes it's hard seeing the relevancy of it, but then once you're able to put it into practice, you really see how vital it is to these early years.
It's one of the awesome parts of having placement in school is that we get to see that. Right? Like we get to see the value of not all of it. Some of it I'm seeing now, 3 years after I graduated. Oh my gosh.
But you get a nice preview.
Yeah, you do. Another thing that I don't think people realize is how big the load is. Even for a diploma program, there's so much content. Placement is very stressful. I can only imagine the amount of studying that is going into a 4-year program, early childhood, like you two did. or are doing.
Yeah, in my program, we did a lot of research courses, leadership courses. We even do social policies because every early childhood educator is leader for the children that they're working with, for the families that they're working with, and for the educators. We really want to see ourselves as agents of change because we know that there's still a lot of issues in this sector of early childhood education.
That's beautifully put. We had 2 classes in my program that had the word policy in the name of the course. And I think that maybe this is because I was 24 when I started the program. I had already gone through university. I immigrated to another country by myself. So my experience was very different than someone who was just out of high school and still living with their parents. So it's easier when you're not only younger, but when you're not thinking for your whole life. Because for me, going to school was, this is the pathway that I'm going to get into this country and stay and start my life here. So I have to value it a lot. So I think that perspective made me appreciate the classes a little more. Like Stephanie was saying that she took for granted some of the classes. I think that might have been, you are a different person when you were in school. I mean, you've been out of school for a couple of years now, I would say.
2 years now. It's really different. When you're in the class, you're there and you're soaking up all of this knowledge. And some of it, yes, can be a little repetitive. You don't realize how much you need all of this information and how much all of it connects. So for instance, the program had psychology, sociology, program planning, environmental planning, language development, human development, interpersonal communications, research methods, math, which a lot of us are not used to as educators. You're lying if you say you are good at math. I'm just kidding. But yeah, basically it was just this large wealth of knowledge that was just given to you all at this one time. And you don't realize how much it was until later on.
Exactly. When Tegan was talking about learning about policies and leadership and educators being leaders for themselves and for the children and the families that they're serving, I was thinking of my 2 courses that had policy in the title. And I was interested in those because I'm interested in social studies in general. But I feel like if I was in school today or if I was attending those classes today, now that I know that social policy is something that I really want to study and that I want to go into further with my career, I would have taken so much more advantage of those classes. I would have asked so many more questions. I don't know. It's easy to get caught up in I would have paid attention to this. I would have gone to bed earlier so I would pay better attention to this class or, Another thing from our program that is a bit challenging is there's a lot of group work in early childhood education.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yes.
And our professors talk a lot about when you go into the field, you're going to be working with a team. So this is good practice. No, I'm sorry, but no. Working with my team and working in a group project in school, night and day, apples and oranges cannot be compared. Because in school, there's not necessarily the urgency of doing well. There's people that are very satisfied with getting B's and just passing. And I was the kind of student that wanted to get A pluses.
Yeah.
And when we're working, all the educators in your team hopefully want to plan the best program possible for the children. So no, professors, that is not true. Do not lie to me.
Yeah, they made us practice a lot of skills, that's for sure. For one of my courses, it was music and movement, and we had to make a whole performance with singing, musical instruments, acting. So it really brings you out of your comfort zone for sure. And I don't think anyone would realize the skills that you need to do this job. There's a lot of performing skills that you need. You need to be an amazing performer.
I say a lot that my practice is very theatrical because I'm a theatrical person.
I can see that, yeah.
I'm very visual. I exaggerate a lot. That might be cultural. That might be my Brazilianness showing. But there's a reason why my circle times, there's a lot of laughter. There's a lot of singing. It's because that's how I like to relate to people. That's how I like to relate to children. My favorite thing to do with children is read stories. And there's so much theatricality to that, right? And that obviously that doesn't mean that educators that have different practices and that are not as dramatic aren't great. I think we need all different sets of skills and personalities in our field. But since we're talking about school, like a lot of this theatricality that I put into how I interact with the children, I learned from ECEs in my placements. For people who are not ECE people, when we go into our placement, we are matched with an educator at that center, and that's the person that's going to do our evaluations. That's the person that's going to guide us and show us the routines, and that's the person that we are quote unquote shadowing.
Your FE or field educator, as they also put it.
Yeah, we field educator, cooperating ECE, like there's all different names. It depends on the college that you go to. And the first educator that I had, my first placement was a toddler placement. It was in the college's lab school. So it was like, oh, this is supposed to be a really tough placement. There's so many layers to that. But she was working with toddlers, but she had told me that her passion was working with preschoolers. Her circle times, her story times, I was just always in awe because she was just so comfortable, so kind. She never missed a beat. There's a child rolling around on the floor while she's reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar. She was just like, that's how he wants to listen to the story. That's fine. As long as he's not hurting himself or others, I'm okay with that. And I was like, how can you be so chill? I don't have a chill bone in my body. So that's one of the many valuable aspects of doing placements in our program is getting those examples of awesome practice.
And that's a good way to lead it into our placements, which is another huge aspect of our program. It varies from school to school. Like I said previously, I had to do 4 placements for 25 to 30 days, whereas other people are doing shorter placements, but more of them. There's a lot that goes on in our placements. We get to be, first off, when they first start you off, you usually start in a childcare. You work with either toddlers or preschoolers or infants, and you basically program plan for them. You learn how to talk to families. You learn how to make relationships with educators, with the children. It's very valuable experience.
A big thing that we learned too in placement, especially on the first one, is how to observe children.
Yeah.
Coming from like a journalism background, to write anecdotal observations was so hard for me because anecdotal observations are straightforward, no inference, no bias. The child picked up the ball. The child threw the ball over their head. Like it's very robotic. And as someone who likes to write, like that was super hard for me. How do I observe? How do I write down what they did without leaving my mark, without assuming their emotion or what they were thinking? Because when we see a child smile, we're like, oh, they're happy. But then as we study more into our courses and development, smiling doesn't necessarily mean that they're happy. I'm not inside their head. And like for me at the beginning, that was like mind blowing. I was just like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Learning to observe, like Stephanie said, learning how to program plan. Oh my goodness, writing curriculum for that first placement was very hard.
You should see the pages that we had to fill out first off. You got to come up with the observation, like Patricia said, anecdotal observation. Then you add your interpretation to it. So what you think was happening in that situation so that you can plan a curriculum based off of it. Oh my goodness. And then you had to get it approved by your field liaison and then approved by your field educator so that you could actually implement the activity with the children.
Because that's the thing about placement, right? You go into the childcare center, you have all this paperwork that you have to fill out throughout however long you're going to be there for, plus your schoolwork because you're still having classes. And a lot of the work that you do in your placements is making relationships with children. That part is usually the easiest. Making a relationship with the educators. That part sometimes is hard. Making relationships with families. That part was always really hard in placement because families have no time. They have no time, and I think families don't understand a lot of what we're doing there as students and how important it is for us to connect with them. It is really hard for families to take like even 5 minutes to listen to, hi, I'm Patricia, and this is my placement. I'm from this and this college. How are you? Can you sign this release form? There's a lot of layers to what we have to learn.
You're basically a baby going into it. Like you're so new to it. It's all new to you.
Yeah.
And to figure out how to maneuver around it is a lot of mental strength, I would say.
And you have to do all that And then at the end of the day, write your observations and interpretation. And that's not your interpretation like, oh, the child was fine, the child was happy, the child was sad, the child was angry. No, it's what skills was that child learning while they were doing whatever it is that you observed them doing. We have to learn about all the domains of development. We have to learn about all the skills and
incorporate how does learning happen into it.
Learn about all these documents that regulate our profession. While, as Stephanie was saying, as babies, I don't want to say babies taking care of babies, but it does feel like you're a baby.
A
when
newbie.
You're a new,
newbie.
Yeah, that's a better way of saying it.
You're a complete newbie to the field.
I was super worried about, do I have a very strong accent? Can they understand me? Do I sound weird? All these insecurities come up when you're starting off in a placement. And meanwhile, now I feel like when we get new kids in preschool, I'm just like, hi, I'm Patricia. This is what preschool is like. It's so much easier as the years go by.
Question, did you guys ever do an activity and it absolutely tanked? Like it was so bad?
So many times. So many.
Uncountable.
Still to this day.
That's obvious, yeah. But now you're okay with it. You're like, a little bit of rejection. But when you're in your first year and you're planning that first activity and you're still figuring out the ropes, and when you plan it and it just bombs.
You don't understand how to set it up properly. You have like this mental picture of what the kids are going to be doing, and they sometimes would look at whatever you set up and walk away.
They're like, nah.
One of the biggest surprises for me, first placement, snow pants. I did not know snow pants were a thing. I didn't grow up in cold weather. My city is a steady 28 to 34 degrees all year long. So if you do not have to wear pants to work or school, you don't have to own pants. That hot. All of a sudden, it was December. My cooperating ECE was like, oh, okay, so we're encouraging them to put these very tight snowsuits and boots on by themselves. They're going to throw their bodies on the floor, but we have to stay calm and remind them that they can do it by themselves. They have to try. And it was just mayhem. All of them are crying, and I was just like, why? I'm sweating. They're sweating. I'm crying. They're crying. Oh. Placement was a very unique experience. Even the good ones are hard. Even the good placements that you have a great relationship with the ECEs, with the parents, even those ones were hard because the expectations are really, really high.
I totally relate to so much of what you both were just talking about, even though I'm still in school and not 100% in the workforce yet. I feel like all the juggling between paperwork and an educator's main job, which is to care for the children, follows us from when we were in placements all the way until when we've become ECEs. And what it's considered good practice compared to what we've been taught constantly change. To me, educators must be lifelong researchers of the early childhood science. The knowledge and understanding around children, early years, learning, teaching, change as we practice. We cannot stop learning, and whoever in administrative or governing roles must facilitate and promote that professional learning. But specifically speaking about the placements of my program, building profound relationships with everyone at the placement sites was the biggest challenge because I was only there for 2 days a week rather than 5 compared to a diploma student who has their academic block separated from their placement block, if I remember it correctly. Other degree students, like myself, had to think of all kinds of ways to communicate with the families, with the educators. We would make newsletters. We would post stuff on their bulletin boards. We would make take-home observation cards, and so on. And of course, we had to make the most of our time, our little time with our cooperating ECEs.
And that's the thing too. It also depends on your rapport with the adults that you're involved with, not just the ECEs and the assistants in the center, but the professor that is supervising you in placement. Right? Like I was lucky enough that I had very supportive people supervising me that I could actually talk to for all 4 of my placements, even placements that were like, what the heck is happening? Why am I here? I should just pack my bags and move back to Brazil. and just, lie on a beach and forget this ever happened. But having that supportive person, that was incredible. And I heard many classmates and colleagues that did not have the same kind of experience, that had very challenging professors or very challenging cooperating ECs. Oh, I also, in one of my placements, the EC quit on my second week of placement. And this was in a public school, and the school did not replace her.
Oh,
and
no.
I was finding myself alone with the kids all the time. And I kept telling the OCT, like, I can't be alone with the kids. Talking to my professor, and the professor would talk to the principal. I'm just glad it's in the past.
I think that just reveals another aspect about being an RECE is that you will sometimes have to mentor
Students.
How do you say students? Yeah. Or people that are new to the job.
So I always say that I bark, but I don't bite, because sometimes I sound harsher than I intend to. Mostly because I'm in a rush. And in a childcare environment, there are so many things happening all the time that I really have to work on not saying like, you can't do that. Not yelling or like, you can't lift a child up like that. That's not safe. That's not appropriate. Like things like that. Because there's people that come in as assistants or as students that literally have never been in a childcare environment, and they want to learn and their intentions are good, but they don't know. They're super green. Like I grew up with many cousins. The age difference between me and my sister is very big. So I bathed her. I changed her. I did all of those things throughout my life. So I've known how to change a diaper since I was 7.
Yeah, like I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my little niece.
But for some people, that's like a whole new ball game.
Exactly. That's something that they've never done. I remember my first placement, I was in a toddler room and my friend was in the infant room. And in that infant room, we had a 6-week-old. So she was fresh out of the oven. And my friend was like, I don't want to hold her. I'm afraid of breaking her. I've never held a baby that small. She didn't have any cousins. She didn't have any siblings. She's never held a baby. And her friends don't have kids. That makes sense that you've never held a baby in your life, right? In those circumstances. So that part of it is scary too. But the expectations are the same. Why aren't you holding that baby? Right? Because the ECs are also stressed, and then they might take it out on the student. There's all these layers. I've been very lucky. I got to mentor one student in my preschool room. I believe we have a very good relationship to this day. I mean, we're friends on Instagram. She's listening to the podcast.
That's nice.
So shout out Chriselle. She was really awesome, but she's very different from me. I'm very loud and I'm very talkative, and she's quiet and reflective, and she took a lot of notes, which is great. But it's just interesting to see the different dynamics that we have. And we got along great. And I was very much like, listen, I sometimes sound scary, but it's just the way I talk. I'm not angry. It's just, if you look at my astrological birth chart, it makes sense. I love using that excuse. Yeah, but because I know Tegan is still in school. But Stephanie, have you had the opportunity to mentor a student?
Yeah, at my previous place of work, I had the opportunity to be with 2 students. One who was in an ECE program, and then another one who was doing her ECE diploma. And she came from a Waldorf background, so that was really interesting. Because I think one of the biggest parts of being in a placement is sometimes coming out of school, you have the newest information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So when you're going to a placement, you're actually sharing that with the educators in the room. And for instance, with the one lady that I was mentoring, she was able to share the Waldorf experience with me, which I was so grateful for, because I know a little bit about it. I know the basics, but not as in depth as she was able to give me.
Because we touch base on it so briefly in school.
Yeah, you learn about the basic pedagogy and the theory behind it, but you actually got to experience it. And I think that's a really important part of placement, is that it's a two-way street. Both people are gaining something. We're gaining experience, but we're also giving the newest knowledge of learning. We've come out with the newest degree or the newest diploma, and we're actually getting the opportunity to share that information.
That is such a beautiful way of looking at it, Stephanie, because not only my placements, but as an educator in my places of work, at my old center, I would see a lot of educators that instead of looking at placement students as that opportunity of learning, they would get very defensive and get very I know better because I've been doing this for 30 years.
And you do, but it's a different type of knowledge that you know. It's just you can't compare it.
you've been doing this for 30 years. So you're probably great at, forming relationships with family. You're probably great at writing observations because to you, it's just second nature already. But I'm coming out of school now 30 years after you, and there's more research. There's more understanding of what children are like. There are things that students can add to our knowledge and to my boss likes to use the word tool belt when we're talking about children, but I'm going to use this as when we're talking about educators as well. Our tool belt, it never stops growing. It's the heaviest tool belt in the world because you can learn something from every educator and every student that you come in contact with. One of the main things about being an educator is understanding and accepting that you are a lifelong learner.
And you're a co-learner.
Exactly.
Like when you're with the kids, you're co-learning with them. That's one of the biggest parts of our knowledge is that we don't know everything. We're both learning together. And that's, I think, a hard thing for some people to take that step back and realize that I don't know everything and I shouldn't know everything. There's way too much to know to begin with. So it's having that realization that you need to take a step back and kind of let things be and ask questions and get involved and do all of those things.
There's this educator at my center that she's been there for many years. Her kids went to the school and she was my first room partner at the center, and my first shift as a supply were with her. And because I was like, I'm trying out this new center, I'm going to be graduating soon, I want to make a really good first impression. So I had a lot of what we call initiative. Of like, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll serve snack, I'll sanitize the tables, I'll talk to the parents. And she gave me that space. Not everybody gives people that space. I know that I need to definitely work on introducing new staff to parents, like when they pick up or when they drop off, because I get so caught up in everything that's happening that I forget to say, hi, this is so-and-so. She's the new supply in our center. She did her first shift here in preschool today. And that staff that was my first room partner, she's so great at that. Because she's been doing it for a really long time. So it's, again, second nature to her, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, that's something that I really want to work on is my interpersonal relationships with the adults. Because with the children, it's easy for me to relate.
I just wanted to add one more thing, though, for anybody who's like thinking of doing this program, is your placements are your biggest professional experience. Make a good impression. I got one of my first jobs through my placement. So definitely make sure you're being your best self because it really counts.
Absolutely. I think maybe later on we could do an episode on professionalism and what that looks like in our sector because it's very different than what it's like being a professional in an office setting. Like those are very different settings. I always looked at my placements as I want to leave this placement with a job offer.
Yes.
Or a job invitation, at least.
Or a reference, anything.
Exactly. I want to leave a good taste in their mouths when I leave. I want to be able to have them on social media and have a good relationship. I want to be able to run into the children and, well, not now because it's been many years, but if they do remember me, that is a good memory. And I was successful at that. I got job offers at all my placements. Oh, except for my specialty placement, which is some people, they work at adult learning centers or dropping programs, or they will work at hospital settings for their placements. And I did a placement at the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare. So it was an advocacy geared placement.
That's really good. Like that was like me too. If you have the opportunity, highly recommend it. A lot of universities and I'm not sure about colleges, but they do give it a lot of grants and funding for international placements. So I had the opportunity to live in the Bahamas for a month and work at a school of children with disabilities. So there's a lot of experiences that you can gain from your placements and you really need to take advantage of that.
Absolutely. I think you just said the word advantage, and I remembered something that we did not talk about placement, which is that you are paying to work a full-time job.
True.
Right? Like, especially the international students, there's a lot of international students in ECE program. I was one, I believe. Tegan, are you an international student?
I am.
Yeah. So there's a lot of us out there. We're paying way more than domestic students. And sometimes it felt really weird to think, I'm paying to work my butt off. Because it's not just the labor that goes with placement, because you're doing all the routine. You're pretending to be the educator because you're learning by doing, right? It's like what we do with the children. They are learning by doing. I would be in placement for 7 hours a day, plus, lunch and breaks and whatever, and get home and write observations, do schoolwork, make stuff for placement. Like our placement had requirements of like, you need to have teacher made materials and books and pictures and newsletters. And it was so much. And although I'm super grateful for all of that, because I feel like it really prepared me for being the ECE that wants to do everything, but it's a lot. It's very taxing and exhausting. And please appreciate the early childhood educators that are caring for your children. We worked really hard to get where we are.
Absolutely. From the very moment we set foot in a room full of children, we have to constantly use various skill sets and knowledge and understanding about all things early childhood that we've been trained and are continuously trained for. An ECE is not a babysitter or entertainer. There's always purposes behind the things that we do with children. And on top of that,
and we're always like meeting requirements for the Ministry of Education. If you're in the city of Toronto, you're meeting requirements for quality assurance. There's a lot of layers to what we do. A lot of people that I hear when they talk about like, oh, I want to leave the field. There's a lot of paperwork. It's so exhausting. I feel so burnt out. There are many reasons for ECE burnout, but one of the biggest ones is the amount of paperwork that we have to do, especially if you work with an age group that there's a high transition level. Like if you work with infants, most infants start at 10 to 12 months, and then at 18 months they go up to a toddler room. So you have to do paperwork for a whole new child that's taking their place. You have to transition that child to the next room. You have to say goodbye to that child, say goodbye to that family. Like when the children transition, it's very bittersweet.
Patricia and Stephanie, I'm still a student, so I've never done this, but next year I will be going through all the procedures to register for my RECE certification and then other paperwork required by the Ontario College of ECE, and I heard that's a lot.
Leading into that, because we all know how much our CPL and registering with the college is a lot of paperwork. Not only do we have to do paperwork in our jobs, we have to do it to get our jobs. So in order to become a registered early childhood educator, you need to register with the college. This can take a minimum 4 to 6 weeks to obtain. Yeah, usually months because they're overflowed. It usually takes a long time. Once you finally get it, you get a registration number. This number follows you everywhere. If you are not following proper conduct, it will say that you're not in good standing, and that is not good because then you can get suspended or you can get, I forget the other term, but you can literally get removed and you won't be able to practice anymore. So there's a lot that we have to do. We also have to pay for our registration. You have to pay admittance fee, which I think is $75, and then you have to pay the registration fee every year, which is $150 to keep our title.
I think it's $160 now.
Oh yeah, it is. It went up. You're right.
And this is the thing. So we do continuous professional development, which I agree with it existing, which is just updating our knowledge, but we have to keep a documentation of what it is and what we've done and all the workshops. And for example, like our podcast can go into our CPL, into our portfolio.
That box. No, I'm kidding.
But we have to keep it for 6 years and just like be ready for an audit at any time. Just like the CRA can audit you, the College of ECEs can audit you. Obviously, thankfully, they've suspended all audits for now because of the pandemic, but that is really scary. And you have to keep them updated on your information. And I don't know if they would actually do anything if you didn't update your address or where you're working within the timeline that they give there, because I've always updated within the timeline. But there's always that threat, like you're going to lose your registration, it's going to be suspended, you're going to be a lapsed member. Like there's all these really scary feelings of like, what if I lose my registration? What's going to happen? Like last year, immigration took a really long time to get back to me about my work permit. The clock was ticking. The College of ECEs was sending me emails about, we noticed that your documents are going to be expiring soon. You're going to lose your membership if you don't get the new one. And I got got them 2 weeks before they expired. Like I got the notification and then I got the actual documents just like 5 days before they expired. So that was really scary because it was like, okay, I'm not losing my membership because of misconduct. So I wouldn't be losing my job. But I had to have the very hard conversation with my boss of like, am I going to be allowed to stay in my room? What's going to happen to me? And she was like, we're going to keep you, of course. But unfortunately, if you do lose your membership, we're not going to be able to pay you as an RCE. That would be a huge pay cut for me. And I was just like, I was super worried. And so much anxiety comes with registering with the college, keeping up with the membership, and doing our CPL as well.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm honestly a little outdated with the policies of registering, but I think at one point in time, it actually stated that ECEs couldn't be seen in public with an alcoholic drink.
There is a lot of that of like we have to be super careful with our social media because this is the thing. So if you're a parent and not an ECE and you're listening to this, you can go on the Ontario College of ECE's website and you go on the public register and you write the name of the educator caring for your child. Like you go over there and you type Patricia Borges Nogueira and it's going to show up my name, my registration number, and it's going to say good standing, but terms and conditions apply because I'm not a permanent resident or a citizen. So those are the terms and conditions. But let's suppose that you are a parent, your child is in my care, and you decided to not just do that, but you decided to Google me. And let's say that I had a lot of pictures out there from my early 20s, drinking and dancing and, just being a young person. I personally don't think that there's anything wrong with that. But if a parent saw that and felt like that was not okay, they could make a complaint to the college.
Which is very stressful.
It's very scary. I mean, I don't have anything out there with my name. I think that if you Google my name, it actually shows up a lot of things in Portuguese, but it shows a list of the top cat in Brazil in 2002 because my childhood cat, won a national prize at a cat exhibition. So I love that story. I had
to squeeze it in there, didn't you?
Of course I did. Shout out to Raja, my angel from heaven. But yeah, like that's scary. You can't have a social life if you're like, because like I live in Toronto, I work in Toronto, so it's a very progressive part of Ontario. What if I moved to, I don't know, a rural part? I mean, people who are listening to the podcast, you might not know, but I'm covered in tattoos and I have blue hair. So I think there might be people out there that don't think that I am the poster child for quality care. I'm very thankful that none of the parents or none of my coworkers have ever seen me at work and thought that, because I go way beyond my appearance. But there's still prejudice out there, right? Like we have to think about those things. That's a scary thought. I didn't even think about mentioning that, Stephanie. Good catch.
Yeah, it's just there's a lot of things that are outdated and that we still have to technically comply with if we are registering with the college, and that's what it takes to be an ECE nowadays. You have to kind of comply even though it doesn't necessarily make sense.
But this is also the thing, and this goes back to also like people like you and Tegan who are coming out of school with a bachelor's degree, meaning you did 4 years of school. We're doing all that. You're going through all that schooling. You're keeping up with your portfolio. You're keeping your membership with the college. You're doing all that. You're working really hard. That does not reflect in your pay.
Nope. According to the latest ECE report by the Atkinson Center, that means it doesn't really matter in terms of your earning, whether you have a diploma, a college degree, a university degree, a master, or even a PhD. I know many passionate ECEs with strong education backgrounds. Those who work in specialized settings, like those who support children with special needs or at-risk children, they usually go ahead and get other training in psychology or in play therapy. I know an educator who works with children with physical disabilities. They said that they felt a moral obligation to keep up with their professional learning and go out of their way in order to support the children and families the best they can. But if the amount of education doesn't reflect in ECE's pay, that means that you may not be compensated for all those efforts and investments in upgrading yourself professionally. If so, I wonder how can we as a profession promote positive changes and keep up with how research informs our practice with children.
The average ECE, Tegan might have a better notion of the numbers.
$17 to $19 an hour.
Yeah, the average ECE in Toronto makes around that. And, excuse me?
Oh, we have like a full episode waiting for that type of stuff.
Just talking about professional pay. So,
oh, yeah.
Again, talking to non-ECE folk who might be listening to this, I'm very fortunate to make professional wage at my center. Shout out to all supervisors that are able and willing to pay their staff a living wage, a professional wage. But the majority of ECs out there either are working poor or have more than one job, because at prices like what we have to face, like rent in Toronto, for example, it's impossible to live on $17 an hour unless you live with roommates or parents or family. And even then, that's really hard. So like if you're listening and you're not an ECE, I don't know, giving your child's ECE a card to say to them that you appreciate them, that's a huge thing. A lot of our job is thankless, not seen. And while it's hard to just be like, oh, starting tomorrow, all ECs are going to get paid $40 an hour. That would be amazing if we had that power. But you out there who are a parent and have children in care, you can make your child's ECE day by being kind, interacting with them, looking them in the eye, making a card for them with your kid. I have so many cards saved from placements, from my old job, from my current job, from kids who are now in college. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but some of the kids I worked with in Brazil some of them have graduated college. Oh my God. Okay. I'm not gonna think about that right now. But just appreciation. While we do want professional pay, be kind to these. So as we're talking about appreciating educators when we come back to whatever the new normal was going to look like, we were having discussions before we started recording about what are going to be the new expectations for students. What is going to be taught in colleges now? Is there going to be courses that talk about remote teaching, technology, and is there going to be trauma-informed practice courses? Because the pandemic was traumatic for children, especially children in vulnerable positions. So I was wondering what you guys think about that, especially you, Tegan, because you're still in school. Do you think that when you go back to the new semester, what's going to be different?
Definitely what you've just said, Patricia. A whole lot of new expectations and skills and mentality for becoming an ECE. We've been already talking about this a lot between us students and our faculty. We can foresee stuff like distance learning for young children. As much as we love to be around the children, we gotta accept the fact that some of them may not even be in a position to come back. Either it's their family's voluntary decision to stay home, or they cannot afford childcare, or the capacity of childcare itself after COVID-19. We were also trying to picture ways we can support children, families, educators, childcare providers to cope with the current health crisis and the aftermath of it. Financial needs, mental well-being, health and safety, working conditions, and stuff like that. Something that was brought to my attention was that once we do reopen childcare, apparently health and safety would be among the top priorities. From an educator's point of view though, will ECEs be spending the day disinfecting the environment, keeping children from touching things, which is very likely to put our profession back into the realm of babysitting that we've worked so hard to overcome?
I was going to say, I definitely agree. It's a sticky situation considering the schooling that we're being put through is pretty intense and we're trying so hard to make it a profession, which it already is, but we need to add that title to it. And we don't know if it's going to make us go backwards, which I think is a really good point that you brought up there, Tegan.
Just before we started recording, I was having a video chat with my friend. Shout out to Kira. I don't know if we're doing shout outs, but I already gave a shout out to my cat. And he's dead. So how about I shout out someone who's alive? And we were talking about what is it going to be like being with young children with physical distancing, because I'm sorry, but that's impossible. Children have so many emotions. I think that 85% of what I say in my typical day in childcare is, do you need some space to go feel your feelings, or do you want to come feel your feelings with me? I say that so many times a day. So many times a day. And when they decide that they want to feel their feelings with me, that usually means they want to sit on my lap, they want a hug, they want a cuddle. That is part of the developmental expectation of a 3-year-old.
Like, how are new students going to be able to grasp that?
Is the human being, like the animal human, going to evolve so quickly that it doesn't need physical contact? How do you do social distancing with infants?
So as far as I know at the moment, we don't have in Ontario an official guideline per se for reopening childcare. But Quebec is reopening very soon, May 11, excluding Montreal. But according to the document that I have of the government of Quebec about reopening childcare, it'll be a multi-phase recovery plan, spacing out from a month and a half with 4 phases. So ratio will start as low as at 30% of normal. So for example, 2 infants per adult and 4 toddlers and 5 preschoolers. And the government is pretty clear about being flexible with social distancing in childcare because it is just not realistic. They expect the ECEs though to do the best they can. I believe we're all learning as we go.
Mm-hmm.
We had our meeting with our community of practice this morning. All 3 of us were there, and we all listened to educators from across the GTA talk about their concern. And going back, the new reality and the new expectation is like, I feel like we're expected to be heroes. I believe that as someone who works with young children, I am a hero. But now the expectation is that I'm a hero who's willing to sacrifice my health and a hero who's willing to sacrifice the health of my family.
I think, Tegan, you brought that up today, actually, right? You said that like we're heroes, but then all of a sudden, is it going to be taken away from us, or are they going to keep deeming us as heroes? I can't remember exactly what you said, but like, was it along those lines?
Absolutely, Stephanie. I'm just going to quote Martha Friendly and Morna Ballantyne here. Childcare is an essential service in good times and bad, and should be treated as one. So I don't think it's really acceptable that we're called heroes and we're expected to be heroes during this specific time only, while certain things like our pay and our working conditions are left to go back to quote-unquote normal. Because ECEs getting underpaid, poor working conditions, and burnout should have never been considered the norm to start with, I think.
I think we're going to learn a lot from countries who are reopening their economy and provinces, obviously. I think Saskatchewan also is reopening or reopened this week. Maybe Alberta too. And then Quebec in the very near future. And then countries like Norway, Germany, and New Zealand, they're preparing for a reopening or have already reopened, some of them.
Mm-hmm.
So as I think about that, I think we're going to learn a lot from those experiences. The economy cannot reopen without childcare. The 3 of us know that.
Lecce said we're a prerequisite.
We are very, very aware of our role in the world economy, because who are the people out there running the economy, making money, making sure countries run? Those people are parents. Where are their children going to go? And I think that that's one of the problems with how childcare is still seen as a private family issue or a women's issue, because people are not looking at it through that lens. And I think that that's going to be a big thing with the recovery from the pandemic, because government is going to have to think about the collective. It's not, oh, you have to go back to work and you don't have childcare, find a babysitter. You cannot tell that to the whole population of the country. Things are going to have to change because they've already changed so much. So just think about from a policy perspective like this, it will have to change. I don't know what it's going to look like when we come back. Are we going to be wearing PPE? Are we going to have face shields on? I really don't know. There is a debate of like that can be scary to the children, but we're seeing that in the emergency childcare centers in Toronto, staff are not wearing PPE and staff got sick, children got sick. And what are we going to do? It's
going to make the rules for becoming an ECE, you're going to really need to be adaptable. I think we're already adaptable to begin with, but I think even more so, we're just going to have to really rethink and change our ways a little bit, and maybe for the better and maybe not so good, but hopefully for the better.
I think that the next few years are going to have a lot of growing pains as a sector. Even if the sector is actually shrinking because people might be leaving the sector, it's also going to be growing in ways that we didn't expect before, because a pandemic is a historical event, right? It brings up a lot of change, even if you weren't directly affected by it, if one of your loved ones didn't get sick or pass away, right? So it's a lot to think about, and it's impossible to not think about it all the time. I don't know about you guys, but it's all I can think about. What is it going to be when we go back? I don't drive, and I live very far away from my center, but I keep thinking, man, if I had a car, because I do have a license, I just don't have a car, I think that I would drive through my neighborhood and do like a sidewalk wave and interaction with my kids, just because I miss them so much. But I also think it would be really hard to see them and not hug them. Yesterday, I got a video from one of my kids. It's this 3-second video, and he just says, "I miss you, Matricia." And my heart just melted like a puddle, because I miss you too, buddy. I don't know if we went too off topic, but
I think it's a good way to end, because it's just a big question mark. And I think if any of you guys have any questions or concerns, especially if you don't know what it takes to be an ECE or to become an ECE, then you should definitely get in touch with us and let us know what your feelings are.
I think that maybe we're still working out the kinks of being podcasters, but maybe at the beginning of next episode, we'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. But part of our housekeeping was adding the land acknowledgement to our episode. We just felt like it was very important to add that, and we apologize for not having it on the first one. Another little bit of housekeeping is I want to thank everybody that left us a comment or sent us a message saying that they liked the podcast, that they felt represented. And
we appreciate you
so much. And all the ECs that sent us messages and said, I feel so isolated. I have all these struggles, and you guys were talking about things that have happened to me, and it's really nice to hear that I'm not alone. You are not alone, fellow ECE. You are not alone. We have different jobs, different ways of practicing, but we're all in this together, and we are all rooting for each other. We want to improve early childhood education and care for us, for the children, for the families, for the economy, for everybody. So the more of us there are in this community, in this revolution, the faster the change is going to come. So if you have questions, concerns, comments, funny anecdotes, sad stories, we are here to hear you. That sounds funny. And you can email us at childcarerevolutionpod, P-O-D, @gmail.com. So I'll share a very sweet and positive story from my childcare life. I was playing the monster game, which basically I just pretend to be a monster and I chase the kids and I go, nom, 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 when I get near them. And this one child was on the slide, and he was on top of the slide. I got near the slide and I was like, "Oh, I got you. Nom, 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 nom." He got my hand and he put my finger in his mouth and bit me. And I was like, we're not doing that. We're just pretending. That hurts. And he goes, "I'll eat you up. I'll love you so." Just like where the wild things are. And this was maybe a month into knowing this child, and I just felt so grateful for what I do, because that's children for you. They are pure and they make your day better so easily.
The Childcare Revolution podcast would like to remind our listeners that we are not affiliated with any universities, colleges, associations, or institutions. Just a couple of passionate educators speaking some thoughts into the air. Thank you for joining us. Please like, follow, and subscribe to listen to more episodes of the Childcare Revolution. Have a lovely day.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.